Hey everyone, Bryan Baylon here. Thank you so much for joining me if you are watching. And before we get into it, just please want to remind you to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any input about this topic, or if you have any experience or questions, feel free to comment below. I will get back to you and respond, and we can go from there. So I'm going to get into it. And today's topic is about buying land and building a house on it. So there's a lot of options out there for houses, right? You have resale, you can rent, you can get a condo, you can get a townhome, you can get a fourplex, duplex, right? You can invest in multifamily, so many different options. What happens if none of the houses are in the place you want or the kind of house that you want? Well, the option you have is to build your own home and buy the land for it. So this question comes up a lot because you've heard about small homes and those tiny homes, really big trend right now. You see on HGTV and all these different projects that people are building homes out in really nice locations, away from everybody, and they get what they want. Basically, I mean, you're the one building the house. If you're going to do that, here are some things to consider if you are going to purchase land. Later on, I'll do one about builders and how to choose a good builder in your area, as that's a very important part of the process. First thing you want to check out is the proximity to utilities. So the price of the land is going to be one of the factors that determines the price of the land is how close they are to utilities. Now, when it's listed on the MLS, it will show you only a range. If it says on property, great. It'll say sometimes 350 feet or less, which means it's in the area or maybe in the neighborhood, but not necessarily on your property, or 350 feet or more, or a quarter mile, half mile, a mile, right? So here's the thing. You're going to be charged, and depending on the quotes that you get based on the contractor, you're going to be charged per square foot to run, let's say, city, if there's a city line, to your property. So, of course, you want to factor that in. If a piece of land is being sold at a market rate and it has utilities a quarter mile away, well, that's an overpriced listing because you have that utility. You have to run that pipe all the way down to your property from a quarter mile to your property, which is a pretty large cost. So consider that kind of thing. There's utilities, there's electricity, and then there's sewage. So ideally that you're going to be on the grid. You can be on the city water, city sewer, right? Or APS. Sometimes you have the option for private well. So you can go into there's private companies, or there's a shared well, or a well that you get water off of. As long as you have a water source, right? Because that makes, basically it makes a property habitable. If you don't, then it comes time to become really creative on how you're going to get water to that property. And hopefully APS as well, APS or SRP, whatever the electric company is. They also have cost per square foot to get power to your house. Sometimes they don't do it, depending on where the piece of land is, if it's too far out. So you're, ideally they're on property. But if they're on property already, chances are they're probably in the city, right? And if they're not on property, then make sure that you purchase it accordingly, building in those costs, getting those utilities. And when you're researching a piece of land, you definitely want to contact the utility companies, get quotes right before you even purchase it, so you know what you're getting into. Number two is it in the vicinity of a flood zone or a floodplain? So up north, and I'm talking about like north of Happy Valley Road and I-17 area, you'll have some land there that's for sale, and they are either sometimes classified as flood zones or floodplains. And they can also exist in the city, right? If you're near some mountainous areas, or it doesn't even have to be very close. You could be a mile or two away from a mountainous area, and it could be in a flood zone. The flood zone and the floodplain, the difference between a flood zone and floodplain is that a flood zone is anywhere where water collects under 1 acre, and a floodplain is anywhere where water collects over 1 acre. And there are specific tiers that insurance companies grade how much to charge you for flood insurance. So of course, flood zone is going to be cheaper than a floodplain because there's more water, there's more risk for flooding in a floodplain since it collects more water. But just know that if it's in a flood zone, at minimum, you're going to be charged for insurance, like flood insurance. And you'll want to get a quote on that, so as soon as you can, and call your insurance company and get a couple quotes on a particular piece of land. It's also going to depend on what kind of property. If you put a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot home there, it could be less for flood insurance because of the risk of damage and the valuation of the property. Also, if you put, a $5 million property on there, of course, flood insurance could go up as well. So all depends. And of course, shop the rates always. So number 3 is setbacks. So even in houses that are built by a builder, they have to adhere to setbacks. You've probably seen recently that houses are being built. The common phrase is they're built on top of each other. And sometimes you see a house in a new build community like this year or last year, where the house is 5 feet away from the block wall and the next house is 5 feet away from that block wall. So you look at 10 feet away, you can hear the neighbor flushing their toilet, right? So you may not, in that case, they still have a setback. But typically what happens in those cases is builders want to maximize the amount of properties they can put in their lots. So that's why they build them as close as possible and try to get the setbacks within 5 feet, because it's more optimal for the builder's initial investment. So, but you don't have to do that necessarily if you have your own property or you buy your own land and you build your own property out, somewhere. So setbacks are different, and it just depends on the land and how it's incorporated. Once the land is incorporated into the city, incorporated to the city, they will do a survey and determine the boundaries and the setbacks, and then they'll zone it. The city will zone it by what they determine what they want to zone it. And there's different types, there's different levels of zoning. So you have the zoning in terms of use zoning. So it's either commercial, residential, industrial, multifamily, right? And then they can also zone it in a sense of like how many. Multifamily and single family are one level, but depending on, and you'll see if you look it up, you'll see like R-40, like that's how they classify the property in terms of zoning. It's another classification. So like say it's R-10 and it's 40,000 square feet, like almost over an acre or just under an acre. Then an R-10 property on 40,000 square feet, you can build. So that 10 is representative of 10,000 square feet. So you can build it'll be like R1-10. So you can build basically one property every 10,000 square feet, but it has to be zoned for that, right? It has to be zoned for you building multiple homes on one piece of land. Now, one thing to note is if you're, how do you consider the difference between single family and multifamily? That's because there's basically a kitchen, and it's for the oven, the 240 volt on the oven, if it's electric, of course. But it's that plug. If you have multiple kitchens and you have that plug, it counts as another kitchen. And this is per when I went downtown to City Hall and we were trying to get zoning and we asked questions for a client. They were saying that. So you can build. It has to be zoned for multifamily if you want more than one kitchen, basically. If you can. Casitas still need to be permitted, right, and stuff like that. But if you're going to build an existing structure with another kitchen, that you could consider another single-family home or some other dwelling unit, like if you were to build an apartment complex, it has to be zoned for multifamily. So check the zoning, because that it will restrict. Oh, that's the right term. Restrict your use. Easements, really important. You go down and research if there's any easements. Specific easements could be, like single family homes have easements that APS, like utility companies, can go in and do what they need to. They need to access your box. They have right of way. That's what an easement is, right of way. They can go into your property and modify, adjust, maintain, fix your electrical box as they need to. Other easements are like, for instance, one of my clients has 2 pieces of land, and there was a river that was going through it, before they started building in the area. The city had regraded it basically so that they modified the easement so that you could actually use. They modified the river so you could actually use the property. But they basically have 2 lots set up, and then there's the river has been adjusted to the side of one of them, and it goes all the way to the back, and then it continues to drain downwards since the grading is sloped downwards for that particular property. It's sloping south to north. So that the whole having easements, you cannot build structures on there. You cannot build anything enclosed in an easement. It has to be open and allowed for the city to have access to it. And that's really the main restriction. Could you landscape it? Yeah, probably, but there's a reason why it's an easement, right? So it's usually for utilities or some kind of thing usually for utilities, most likely, unless there's some strange permission that you've given to a private party or something like that. Like say, for instance, if you own a lot that's deep, let's say it's an acre deep, and then there's a property back here that's owned by one party, and you own the property up front, and you're giving them driveway access to the back, then that's an easement in a sense. You're giving them right of way to access their property. But other than, that's another example. But other than that, yeah, just understand your easements if there's any, because it will also restrict your use. Zoning, we talked about. Permit times, this is really important. So permit times are basically we've talked before. This is before COVID-19 issues. Permit times take about 6 months, sometimes 6 to 9 months to get a permit on a house. And that's pre-COVID because they were just really busy with creating new builds. So now, as we're transforming into the state that we're in terms of sheltering in place and things like that, City Hall is only taking by appointment only right now. And could you get an appointment to build a house? Most likely, right? But they're really going after essential services only. So there's that. Also, you want to run good comps. You don't ever want to pay overpriced for a piece of land. So be careful just be careful as you're pricing out a piece of land property that it's going to be worth what you're paying. And another surprise item is grading. You want to make sure that if you're buying a house on a piece of on the side of a mountain, and you just see that it's basically nothing's been done to it and it's just sloping, that is a big problem. Here's the thing, it's not a big problem, but here's why. If you buy a property that's on a slope, like a mountain slope, you're going to want to factor in how much it's going to cost to grade. Especially if it's on a steep mountain hill, you'll see, this is actually relatively cheap. It's $120,000. Utilities are on there. You could get an estimate that it would cost $200,000 to grade, and just to grade the property, right? So, and then grading has different levels, right? You can actually grade it in such a way where you can elevate it above the other properties, so you don't have to do the bare minimum line, because there are city standards and codes for bare minimum line, but you can actually elevate it so that you can have a better view, which I've actually seen some houses do. So that is hopefully covers everything. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Please contact me, 602-410-0827. And again, please like, comment, subscribe. Your support will be very, very helpful. And I can put out more content for you. Also, I would want to be able to provide something of value to you. So if you do have something that you want me to talk about, please comment or contact me so I can make a video for you. All right, hope you guys are doing great, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.